Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today to listen to our webinar where we're going to talk about the recent announcement with regards to our assurance platform and corresponding updates. My name is Claire Willers. I'm Senior Manager for Market Relations here at Gold Standard, and I'm joined by someone who needs no introduction. It's Owen Hewlett, our Chief Technical Officer. And today we'll be running through a bit about the what, why, where, how of the update and the assurance platform, but we want to really make sure that we leave enough time at the end for questions. Just before I pass it over to Owen, there's just a couple of housekeeping items that we would like to go through. So this webinar will be recorded and the recording may be published online on our website, so just be aware of this. Please can you use the Q&A box to post any of your questions. We're encouraging as many questions as possible, so please use that box to do so. If we have to finish on the hour today, so if you don't manage to, or if we don't manage to answer those questions during this session, we will follow up with responses. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Owen, who's going to tell us all about the what, the why, the where. What is this new announcement, Owen? Please tell us.
Shall do. Yeah, thanks, Claire, and hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks for your attention. I know busy people, but lovely to see so many familiar names. So yeah, as Claire said, I just want to explain a little bit about the what, why, and how of this announcement, and then Claire will get into a bit more of the detail, and there's an opportunity in the Q&A to ask us some questions. So maybe before getting into assurance, just to say that Gold Standard operates a 5-year strategy cycle, and this year we were 21 years old, I think, 20 years old, 21 years old. Anyway, we're about to go into a new strategy cycle is the point of that, and that launches early next year, and there'll be lots of exciting things for you all to see there. And that strategy really has, really, when you boil it down, two big things in it. One is that we remain committed to leadership in our existing core portfolio, meaning carbon markets and carbon market related instruments. And there it's all about how we pioneer, lead, best respond to market demand, and continue to drive integrity. So lots of that in the strategy. But then there's also lots of areas of innovation as well. So when we released Hi, sorry, can we go on mute, whoever that is, please? Thank you. Can we mute them, do we think? There we go. And then there's lots of areas of innovation as well. So when we released Gold Standard for the global goals, those that remember that far back will remember lots of talk about creating a modular standard that could have lots of different applications, climate, nature, society, different markets, think biodiversity, for example, think different assurance pathways, portfolios, policies. So there's lots of innovation in the use cases of the standard, the activity types within the standard, and the digitalisation of the standard and assurance and methodologies around it. So really that's the second area of the strategy that you'll see come forward. If we go on a slide there, Claire. Specifically in the context of standard, there's two things I think that are worth being aware of. So what this slide is showing, let me just explain that first. There's 5 strategic priorities identified within the strategy that you'll see coming forward from January onwards. The first speaks to our work on corporate responsibility. So the demand side of things like the carbon markets. What are mature, thoughtful uses of things like carbon credits? What's the best way to think about enacting Scope 3 responsibility? How should companies think about making credible claims? Strategic priority 2, 3, and 4 are really what we're talking about today as critical work streams around GS for GG. So looking at the standard and how it's presented, its legibility, its accessibility, how assurance is conducted, etc. Thinking about how we support our stakeholders, whether it's project developers, VVBs, buyers, governments, to understand and best enact those things, and how we digitalize that to make it as accessible and efficient as possible. And then priority 5 is really more internally facing, thinking about how Gold Standard further professionalizes. As I say, we turned 21 this year. It's there's a lot of things that we're now we're now adults in that sense, and there's lots of things that we want to professionalize internally. So think legals, HR, finance, etc. If we go on a slide there, in terms of how this translates into the digitalization, one of the questions, maybe slightly, Gold Standard likes to think big, so this might be a good example of this. But one question we asked ourselves is, in a world where digital business, tech-based businesses are coming forward, what does that look like at an NGO? What would it look like if we were tech-based or digitalized end to end? And this is a characterization of that. You may have seen us talk about GSIQ, which is a brand envelope for this entire digitalization, which talks of the supply side. So think about our standard and assurance and oversight, but also the demand side, the sale of credits, how the registry conveys our work. And so really GSIQ is an ambitious 5-year program that includes within it the digitalization of all of these aspects. And really what you're seeing with the assurance platform and soon the registry also is the first priority urgent moves into that space. Probably the first that you're probably most familiar with, I would say, is the SDG impact tool. That was really the trailblazer in terms of the digitalization of Gold Standard, but there's a lot more where that came from in the strategy. If we go on a slide, so thinking about assurance, there's quite a lot to think about in terms of the need for an assurance update. And with it's not a coincidence at times with the strategy cycle, but there's really, when you boil it down, 3 main areas. One is to broaden the applications of GS for GG, and by application I mean assurance pathways, use cases, outputs, activity types, methodologies. There's also a need to both lead and react within the context of the carbon market. So there's lots of things Gold Standard can pioneer and take a leadership position on, and you'll see a lot of that. But there's also some places where an incumbent 20-year-old standard needs to make sure it stays up to speed. So there's also that, and our assurance needs to align with latest thinking. And then there's an opportunity to innovate. So as I said earlier, what does a digital or a tech-based NGO actually look like? Well, in our case, one of those things is for sure the assurance process, document management. And so there's a huge space for innovation. So there's a real need and a real opportunity for an update. If we go on a slide, I'll explain what that actually includes. This slide is really conveying what we do today versus what we are now going to, sorry, it's not today, what we were doing a few weeks ago and what we do today. So the existing process will be familiar to many on the call. Project developer appointed a Gold Standard VVB. That VVB validated and or verified the project. That report was passed to a certification body who reviewed it, discussed it with the VVB, and then made a decision which was sent to Gold Standard for issuance of carbon credits or issuance of certification. The new model, the new approach is not so dissimilar to that, but there are some important differences. In this case, project developer still appoints the VVB. That's not changed. The VVB drafts its recommended validation or verification, passes that into the assurance management process of Gold Standard, where a reviewer will review that recommendation, share feedback with the VVB. The VVB will then consolidate a final recommendation, which becomes the decision for Gold Standard to issue to certify. So if I was to boil it down really quickly, there's 2 main changes. One is that the VVB is now the decision maker. We don't drop the review, but the review is managed in-house by Gold Standard using independent reviewers. So if we go on a slide, Claire, just in terms of what that means as a knock-on effect for stakeholders like our VVBs. So in changing the point of decision making, in updating the way reviews are managed, it's really important that we implement another series of infrastructure and resource changes. So one would be that where Gold Standard serves as the central point of contact for applying GS for GG, we've introduced a digital platform for that. And we've also introduced a team to manage it, the assurance and review management team. And we've also introduced a roster of independent reviewer experts that that team will manage through those reviews. So it's not a case of simply changing the process and leaving the market to it. It's very much update process, implement platform infrastructure and resource to deliver it. And we've been doing that now since the 5th of December when this launched. And then already you've seen streamlined processes to the registry, invoicing and fees, which Claire will talk about in a minute. If we go on a slide there.
I think that it's passing over to me. So Owen's given a great update in terms of what the changes are. And he also mentioned that to support that, we've launched a new digital assurance platform. And so this platform is really there to house the project documentation and to help facilitate the efficient management of that documentation and to enable workflows depending on the different types of requests that different stakeholders require through the platform. The platform is also connected to all the relevant gold standard applications, so the impact registry, the SDG impact tools, so some of those applications that Owen talked about in the GSIQ slide. So that's all seamlessly integrated to ensure that the systems are talking to each other and to avoid any duplication. The system is also, and this is something quite new, and I think it's important. So the system has been set up to enable stakeholders to participate in a process as per their role requirements. So what does that really mean? So that means that there's different areas and different sections within the platform that enable stakeholders. So whether that's a VVB, whether that's internal staff within Gold Standard to help support these reviews, whether that's the external roster of experts that are going to be doing the quality check on the reviews. So the system is set up to enable those different stakeholders to perform their different roles and requirements. And the hope is that we've done this in one central system to move away from, some of those more traditional ways of communicating like email. If we have one central system where everything is housed, it's going to support better, more efficient, more timely decision making. The platform we originally announced it in mid-November and it was launched publicly for use on the 5th of December. What this means is that from the 5th of December, any new reviews, any review that hasn't been paid for or hasn't yet been paid, should and can be, is to be submitted through the Gold Standard digital assurance platform using this updated process. If you have a project that has already paid for a review, we don't want to cause any unnecessary disruption. So that project can continue within the same process and applying the same existing certification body. Another point here that I think is important is that for existing projects, and some of you may have already accessed the system and had a little look around, but for existing projects, the data, so all the project documentation and data has already been migrated across from the SustainSat app into this new platform. So for any existing projects, we're encouraging project developers to go in, have a little check, just make sure everything is all as it should be, everything's in place, but that data should have already been migrated. Okay, so I just want to briefly touch on some of the functionalities. So as I mentioned, this is a platform that will house all the project documentation. It's also the platform where you can create brand new projects, you can create new POAs, you can add POAs to an existing POA or create new POAs under new VPAs under a POA. God, there was a lot of acronyms there. So basically, you can create a new project. You can also create requests. So whether that is a request for review or a request for a design change, you can do that through the system. And that when you create a request, the platform will then show you what fields and what informations need to be updated. It will provide details on what documentation will need to be uploaded at a different or specific periods in time. And then you can submit once you have all the documentation and everything's been uploaded as it should, you can make a submission for that request through the platform. The platform can also enable you to assign your VVB. It can also enable, sorry, I just moved the thing. It can also, I don't know what happened to the slide then, I'll just continue. It can also help with stakeholder consultation process, which I will talk about in the next, or a bit further down in the presentation. And it also enables you to manage your documentation. So in some cases, you may have information or documentation that is sensitive and shouldn't be uploaded for public consumption. So the system enables you to make different or certain documents public versus private. There's also, and I don't know why I've lost this part of the slide, but there's also some functionality in terms of dashboards. So if you've got multiple different projects within your system, then you have dashboards, so you're able to manage those different projects and the different requests going through via those dashboards. There's also automatic notifications. So when projects reach different stages of a request, then they will be automatically notified about that. My next slide, hopefully, if it works, is I'm going to run through, or I'm going to show a little demo that provides an example of how to create and submit a new request. And then after that, I'm going to run through a simple workflow for a request just to make sure that it's clear. And then I can talk through some of the additional things like global consultation. So let's all ensure our fingers are crossed to see if this works.
Within a project page, users can create a new request from the Requests tab. You will arrive on the New Request menu and can proceed to selecting a request within the drop-down. Different types of requests are available for different stages of the certification process. The different requests define the workflows to be followed, data required, documents to be uploaded, and who it is to be assigned to. For this example, we will select Design Certification. Proceed to selecting a crediting period ID, input estimated annual emission reductions or removals, and select Next. The request will specify the required documents specific to the type of request. The request status will appear as In Preparation. The next stage will be to prepare and upload the required documentation to the request. After uploading the documents, the document status within the request will change. Please note, the project developer is responsible for uploading project documentation, and the VVB is responsible for uploading validation or verification documentation within their account. Once the required documents have been uploaded, project developers can click Submit Request and select VVB. A full list of approved VVBs will be shown in the drop-down menu. The selected VVB user account will be notified within their request dashboard and has the option to accept or reject the request. This inbuilt communication feature within the platform will improve project assignment efficiency and document management. Once a VVB has accepted an audit request, they will be granted access to the project documentation and can begin the audit. The request status will appear as In Audit. VVBs will have their own user accounts and separate functions within the assurance platform. Once the VVB has finalized their audit, they will submit all documentation, including the validation or verification report, into the assurance platform. The submission will trigger a completeness check performed by the gold standard assurance team. The status of the request will be updated to completeness check. The My Requests tab clearly presents the status of all requests made by the project developer. Users can quickly assess the progress of all active reviews using one simple dashboard that shows key request information such as request type, review status, a round of reviews count, required document status, and invoice status. We'll run through.
There we go. So that gives a little taster of what the assurance platform looks like and what it can do. So if I move on to my next slide, and hopefully this one will work, I'll run through a bit more detail the workflow that was shown in that demonstration. Before I start that, I just want to talk about an important feature that I think is key to highlight here, and it's that the platform has been designed in a way that access and functions depend on role and assignments. So what I mean by that is that access will be granted only for those who have been assigned and only for what they have been assigned, authorized to see, and only at the time when it's their turn to view that information. So I think that's quite an important part of the system to understand, especially because we have multiple different stakeholder types that are participating in the gold standard certification process. And so if we talk through the workflow here, so we have a request, project developer pulls together all their information, they provide that information to the VVB. A point to note here is that there is no change in how you contract your VVB and how you provide your information to your VVB. So that's the same as it always has been, and there's no change in that process. The VVB will then go review all the documentation. They will do the audit. So whether it's a validation or verification, they will do that audit. They'll pull together their finalized audit reports. One change that is now in place is that it's the responsibility of the VVB to upload the final validation or verification report. And so they can do that directly into the system. So once all of that's been done, all the documentation has been uploaded, the final validation and verification reports are there, then it goes into our team internally who will conduct a completeness check. And so that's really just to check that all the documentation that should be is there. If there's anything missing, it will go back as a request and it will go back to the VVB and the project developer to provide that missing information. And you have now, we've put in some timelines, which I'll talk about in a bit in the next slide. So you'd have 2 weeks to provide that missing information. Once all the information's there, it will go into assignment. So the internal team within Gold Standard will then assign it to a reviewer. What I want to highlight here is that there is a conflict of interest process built into this whole process. So when the internal team assign it to a reviewer will need to declare whether there's any potential conflict of interest. If there is, and they need to do that before accepting the project. If there is, then the project will not be assigned to them and it will be assigned to a different reviewer. Another point to mention here is this is when the global public consultation will be activated. And so the team internally will publish the documentation that can be published publicly. They will do that alongside the review, and they'll do that for a 2-week period. And so there's a page on our assurance platform which will list all the projects that are under public consultation. And so this will run anytime there's a design review, a performance certification review, or crediting renewal. And just to note, this is additional to the stakeholder consultation the local stakeholder consultation process that you have at the beginning of the process. So this is additional. And it's really to enable or provide a mechanism for more inclusive feedback, with an aim to ensure that we have stronger, more robust project design. And so, yeah, and any feedback. So another point to note, any feedback that we do receive during that process will be shared alongside the review outcome. So once it's been assigned, that will also automatically generate an invoice for the review fee. A point to note here, and something that we've implemented that we really hope will help support project developers, is that you no longer need to have paid for the fee for the review to start. However, you will need to have paid for the review for you to receive the findings from that review. But we hope that that will reduce some of the barriers that have been seen previously. And then the reviewer will obviously then conduct the review. They will close the review and provide the feedback report, including any feedback that came through on the global consultation. If there's any requests for clarifications, or if there is any corrective actions, these will go back into the project developer and or the VVB. And then this final part is to note that responses to those will go back to the same reviewer to ensure consistency, and it obviously bypasses the completeness check and assignment and any additional invoicing or payment. Okay, the next slide. So we published alongside, so there's a couple of other key updates that I just want to run through because I think they're important for project developers to know. These are included in a document that's called the Rule Updates for Standards Assurance Model Updates. You can find it on our website, and we can share it after this webinar as well in the follow-up communication. But I'd really recommend project developers to have a look through that Rule Update document because it's a really good summary of the changes that have been made, the rationale for those, and how they may impact project developers. And so we've talked a bit about global consultation. We've talked about revised payment schedule. Another thing that we've published alongside the assurance platform is some updated fees. And we really spent time looking, and so this is the first update that we've had to gold standard fees since 2017, and we really took the view when doing the analysis around this and what they should be, and it's really to look at how we can manage the growing complexities in the market, so some of the things that Owen talked about earlier in the presentation, whilst also maintaining our focus on what's core and important to us, and that's supporting high impact projects on the ground. We've also made it clearer and simpler to administer, which we hope will go down well with everyone because our last fee schedule was quite complicated in places. A second point I just want to talk about, and this reiterates as well what Owen was talking about, but we've increased our capacity in order to help support VVBs. And so we understand that with this change in our assurance model, we also need to make sure that we have the time and space to be more proactive with our VVB community. So there's a whole team and a whole strategy in place to enable more proactive engagement and support and training. There's also the implementation of a more comprehensive performance management and evaluation process as well. And then another thing I just want to mention is that we've introduced new response timelines for project developers and VVBs. And this is when responding to requests for clarifications or corrective actions, it's really, or any other observations. And it's really, we've implemented this as a way to set clear expectations and really to enable a kind of more structured and predictable certification process. And so there's a table on that slide that that includes the minimum weeks. And so the gold standard review timelines is the top line, and then project developers and VVB response timeline is the bottom line. And so, this table is just for guidance. Obviously, know this already, reviews are concluded when all CARs and clarifications are successfully closed. But the idea of this new procedure is really to kind of ensure that we have more predictable certification process for everyone involved. I have one last slide and then I'm going to open it up to questions. So I think many of you have already got access or gained access to the assurance platform. Hopefully you've had a little look around. Hopefully you're pleased with what you see. If you haven't yet done that, the web address for the assurance platform is there provided, and there's an online form to register for access. So the team, we've had quite a lot of applications come through since the 5th of December. So the team are currently processing within about 2 business days. On approval, you will receive an email that has further instructions, and so that will enable you to reset your password and then access the system. For users that are not already registered in one of our other gold standard applications, so our impact registry or our SDG impact tool, there's additional information that will be required for us to open an account for you, and so the team will provide that in the to you directly in a communication. And then my final thing to say is that if you do encounter any issues, if you have any questions, if you just want to know more about this, then we have a team ready and available to support you at help@goldstandard.org. So now I'm going to close this presentation and then open it up to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. So there's some good questions in, as you'd expect. I would just say, wherever people have project-specific questions, what if I'm, this date or this document, then please submit those to the help desk. If you're stuck, we won't go through project-specific answers today. I think it's probably not helpful to do that. But Claire, maybe just the first couple of questions, you've gone over in the slides a bit there already, but maybe if you could just reiterate the review timelines and expectations. I think that's a pretty frequent question. It just bears repeating, I think. I think Claire may have frozen at an inopportune moment there. Claire, have we still got you? Yeah, Vikas, do you want to come in on that one? Sorry.
Yeah, so the review timeline as for like different kind of reviews are now, the standard will remain same. The new kind of addition to the review timeline is like response from the project developer and the VB once the review feedback is shared. In that, like for this particular timeline, we have introduced 2 weeks for the preliminary review and 3 weeks for 6 weeks for other kind of reviews to ensure the predictability of the responses from the VBs and the project developers. Other than that, for gold standard review timeline is same as it was in past, and it is in principle and requirements.
Thanks, Vikas. And then maybe just concerning the global public consultation, I think this is a question about how people can participate in that, but not as part of the project. Do they need to set up an account?
Global public consultation, no account is needed. As soon as project will reach to the global public consultation stage, the documents will be available to any stakeholder who would like to see the document and comment on. And for this commenting on these document, there is no account needed. Currently, there are no project appearing because we don't have the project in the review stage where we need to start the public consultation. I'm hoping that from first week of January onwards, there will be new project start appearing in that list.
Great, thanks, Vikas. We've got some questions around the appointment of VVB and the COI situation there. So just in terms of who pays for the VVB and who pays for the review, just to answer that quickly. So the project developer appoints and pays for the VVB from the approved list, and it's the project developer that pays review fees. But Vikas, maybe just a question around how we manage conflicts of interest, both in the VVBs, and I think it's probably also worth covering ROEs, just in terms of the expert reviewers as well. If we could just quickly give a précis of how we manage those.
Yeah. For the VVBs, to ensure impartiality and also avoid conflict of interest, there is a set of requirement outlined in the VVB requirement and document, which is quite extensive. and that is to ensure that there is no direct interest from the VEB in the project development and implementation, no financial interest there. Those are the provisions for the VEB. In the same way, for experts who will be assigned the reviews, do also need to declare and we do cross-check the information that they have provided to confirm that the expert does not have any past relationship, direct interest in the project success, and also any financial kind of involvement or any contribution to the project development in past through consulting or any expert advice. So those are the criteria that are used to basically ensure that there is no conflict of interest at the expert's end, especially for the project that they are reviewing.
Thanks, Vikas. I only would add to that as well that overall, Gold Standard is a member of the ISEAL Alliance, and so our overarching governance system has been extensively designed, reviewed, approved, re-reviewed, reapproved for matters like conflicts of interest. It's also something captured within things like ICBCM, so we're really confident in our COI approach. Just in terms of another question there on fees borne by the VVBs, we won't get into that. Maybe we could put the link in the Q&A there, but just to say there's a separate fee schedule for VVBs to be approved as GSVVBs, and we just put that in the questions. There's a couple of questions there, possibly Claire, best placed for you around VPAs and POAs and the way the fees apply to those. I think it's really a question about what's included in the POA fee. Is each individual VPA charged? If you want to say a few words about that, perhaps.
Yeah, of course. And apologies, I dropped out because I apparently lost my internet connection just as I was introducing Vikash. So I hope you introduced yourself, Vikash. Fees. Okay. POA fee. So with regards to fees, so with a POA, you have a structure whereby you have your real case POAs, and then you have your regular VPAs that can form underneath that. And so for design review and performance review, the real case VPAs will be charged at the fixed price within the fee schedule, but any regular VPAs underneath that will be charged at a 40% discount. And that's just because they're obviously following the same format as the real case VPA, and so the review process should be simpler with regards to those. Was that clear?
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Perfect. Maybe add any other questions in the chat if people didn't grasp that one. Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to add actually just one more point. So when it comes to crediting renewal, so that will be a fixed charge for all VPAs underneath that. So just for clarity. So the 40% discount is applied at review. Thank you.
Brilliant. Just in terms of completion of a process under sustained cert, so we've got it. It's easier to read out the question in this case, I think. So project under design review performed by sustained cert. When will the migration of the project data from sustained cert platform to GS platform happen? And will it be done automatically? Again, you covered this, Claire, but I think it bears repeating.
Yeah, so existing projects, all of their project documentation has already been migrated across to the new platform, so that should all be in place as and where it should be. Yeah, and then anything, so new reviews moving forward, they will upload their documentation directly into the assurance platform.
Brilliant. And there's a related question. Oh, sorry, Vikas, did you want to come in there?
Yeah. Just to add, the timeline that we shared applies to the project that will be project or request of review that is submitted at Gold Standard platform. The existing project that are going through the review with Sustained Cert platform will follow the usual process and will be kind of like completing the ongoing reviews within Sustained Cert platform. Even the new document that are to be submitted to complete the review are to be done at the Sustained Cert platform. We have the provision to import all the documents to the platform. Until you are done with your review with Sustained Cert platform, you do not need to interact with the GS platform with respect to ongoing reviews.
Thanks, Vikas. And there's a good follow on there, which is just to say, projects in that situation, will they automatically be assigned an account, or do they need to create an account?
Can you repeat? I missed that.
Yeah, maybe it's one for Claire as well, but like just projects in that situation, completing a review, later migrating for the next time they review, they'll come into the GS platform. Will they automatically be assigned an account to the GS platform, or do they need to create one? Yep.
So you need to go through the process. So that was the last slide I presented to make sure that you have user access to the platform. But the documentation will already be there within the platform.
Well, thanks, Claire. There's a few sort of similar-ish questions around sort of repeating the timelines for review and what penalties there are in place for not meeting those. I think maybe just to speak a little bit about the philosophy there, and maybe Vikas, feel free to come in. So the rounds of review and the timelines given in the standard in the FAQs are really guidance. Obviously, we really care about hitting those timelines and the quality and consistency of review, but also recognizing there's lots of different contexts, lots of different situations. And so punitive measures like, you're a day late, therefore X, aren't always super helpful in that situation. Rather, the philosophical approach that GS implements here is performance quality management monitoring, so that we can really keep an eye on that, look for systemic issues and resolve those. But Vikas, I don't know if you want to say anything else there. I just sort of, there's a few questions around, what happens if you don't hit the timelines of review, and I think it's better to consider it more like or Claire for that matter, if you want to come in.
Well, I was going to say it's probably worth just noting in terms of and so for project developers, we've put in some timelines for VVBs and project developers, and there isn't a penalty if those timelines are not met. There isn't a penalty per se. The only real impact that may have is it may impact the timeline of your certification process, because if you don't meet your 6 weeks to provide the information, then the reviewers will have scheduled timelines, and they're based on these different timelines. So you just might miss your window for your review, and therefore you have to reschedule a time when the reviewer has availability. So that's the impact from a project developer or VVB perspective if they don't provide the information within the 6 weeks.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Claire. Yeah. Just in terms of the question around one external reviewer assigned to review a project, so just to confirm that that's the case, but as per the slides, there is a gold standard assurance review management team, an internal team, newly appointed to manage that process. So a gold standard person will manage the process and then assign a reviewer to the project, but that, there will be one reviewer that reviews that project, basically. Sorry, my Q&A is frozen, which is super unhelpful. So we had questions like this in the other session as well, Claire, which you answered really well, which was, is it the case that only one person can have access to the GS platform from the account, or can there be several? If you want to just speak to that and what our future plans are.
Yep. And so no, there's not just one person that can have access to the platform. You can have multiple users access the platform. Something just to be mindful at the moment is that we've launched, I guess you'd call it a minimum viable product. So there's going to be additional enhancements made to the platform. So just to note that any user that has access to the platform as it currently stands will have access to all projects underneath a specific account. So if you're working with a consultant, for example, you can give them access, but they'll have access to every single project that you have within your organization. And then we have plans, development plans to look at how to look at user management. And so how can we potentially, for example, have user management at a project level? So account managers can pick and choose which users can have access to which different types of projects within their portfolio.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a few, again, I think this is possibly people missing the start of the call, but there's a few questions around, are the credentials the same as for the Sustain Cert app in the GS platform? That's not the case. Claire, you already showed that slide, but sorry, for the sake of repetition, it might be worth saying again. Yep.
Yeah, so there's an online form, so you can submit for access under the online form, and then there will be an email that's sent to you that will enable you to reset your password. And then once you've reset your password, you can access based on that reset password and your username.
Great, thank you.
We will we will follow up with this webinar. We'll follow up with an email communication with links to all of this relevant information and links to the FAQs that have come out of this webinar as well. So so you'll receive more information and the specific links after this webinar.
Super. Thanks, Claire. There's a question, maybe Vikas, I think this isn't correct, but actually it would be worth just weighing in on. So the updated principles and requirements indicate that if response timelines are not met, then a fee will be charged. But that's not, yeah, do you want to elaborate on that one, what the principles and requirements are saying? Yeah.
Yeah, like what principle and requirement is saying that if you do not meet the timeline, your request will be cancelled, then you have to restart the request from scratch. Meaning you have to resubmit it as a new request and then it will go through. As Claire mentioned earlier, there is no financial penalty and it is not also reflecting in the principle and requirement. So I think the confusion here is like whether the new request, if need to be submitted, a new fee will be charged. So just to clarify, there is no new fee to be charged, to be paid. The request will start from scratch. So Gold Standard has to basically reassign the project to a new reviewer and go through the process again. And that was the point Claire was referring to, that it will delay the entire sort of review process because then you miss the window and the new reviewer will start from scratch and then continue the process.
Thanks, Vikas. And I think Laura's asked a question that was answered earlier about whether you need to create an account and have a project to participate in the global public consultation. Per Vikas's earlier answer, you don't need an account for that. Vikas, is it worth reiterating that one just for, yeah, I think Laura may have dropped out of the call there.
Yeah.
Missed that one.
So to comment on project during the global public consultation period, you do not need an account. Any stakeholder can access the project document and can make the comment. There are not, like as I said earlier, there are no project appearing in the list as of now, considering we don't have project under global public consultation at this stage. From January first week onwards, we will start seeing project in that on that page.
Thanks, Vikas. And I think, Claire, that brings us to all the questions asked so far, which is extremely efficient of this group and of us. Yeah. So I'll hand back to you,
especially since since I dropped out for I don't know.
Maybe that was the key. Yep.
Great. Well, I think if there's no additional questions, then I think we can potentially close early. As I mentioned, we'll follow up with an email that contains more information and links to the relevant documents and access to the platform and anything else that can help support you guys with this new process. And I'll leave it for Owen to close in a minute, but I'll just reiterate and say that if you do have any questions or you do run into any issues or encounter any problems, then please do reach out to us at help@goldstandard.org and we will be there to support you.
Excellent. Thanks, Claire. And thanks, everybody, for taking time to join us, and hope you really enjoy using the new platform. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.